Hi, everybody. Thanks all for taking some time out of your day to spend even more time thinking about event marketing. I expect the reason so many of you have dialed in today is because you feel like you may be spending an awful lot of time already thinking about event marketing, and maybe this is an investment towards curtailing some of that thinking about it, because maybe we'll be able to come up with some strategies going to make it a little easier for you. I've been involved in event marketing and production and programming for about a decade in various capacities at a number of different organizations, and I found that it's unique in a lot of marketing disciplines because you're never done. It starts as soon as you start thinking about the event and start publicizing it, or even thinking about how to publicize it, and you're not finished until the keynote speaker takes the stage. You're really not. So it's a little bit different in that there's always the pressure to feel like you can do a little bit more. We can squeeze out another message. We can put a few more butts in seats. We can fill one more booth in the exhibit hall or get one more press contact to sign up. So it creates an awful lot of pressure for event marketers. It's something that I've seen unique to that part of the discipline. It's a lot like running a marathon. And people who run a marathon will tell you, or long distance athletes will say, it doesn't get any easier, you just get faster. And it's really the same thing with events. They really don't get any easier as you spend more time at them. You just get more people to come to your events. But you still have to keep the pressure on from the moment you conceive the event until it's showtime. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Excuse me. How come it got so hard? There's been a big shift in the event industry in the last decade, and I'm going to talk a little about what drove that shift and what it means to us today. We're going to talk about event brands as communication shortcuts. The channel agnostic strategy that as I refer to it, really taking a look at all of the different communications channels, how they work. I wouldn't say together. It's not so much about how they sync together, but it's how they work in parallel to help you meet your communications goals for your event. And then we're going to focus on some success metrics, the what, how, when, and who of success metrics. So why did event marketing get so hard? It wasn't always as hard as it is today. Billy Joel said the good old days weren't always good. Billy Joel obviously was not in event marketing in the late 90s. If you were, you know what I'm talking about. If you weren't, you missed a party, frankly, because it was just an amazing time to be in the event business. The tech bubble was swollen to as big as it was going to be. Venture capital was flowing as freely as Grey Goose on the martini luges at the dot-com Christmas parties. There was a huge demand for networking and FaceTime and deal making and building the public perception. And this was happening in all industries because the economy was so strong back then. It wasn't just limited to the tech industries. There are very few industries that weren't impacted by this huge economic boom that was driven by tech. I remember at the time, I was working for a research company, and sponsorship sales was really, it was almost sitting next to the fax machine waiting for contracts to come in. And registration, audience development piece was at times as simple as sending out an email saying, we are now accepting registrations. Please register today to ensure your seat at our 3,000 person conference, and it would fill up almost immediately. So very different environment from what we're looking at right now. What happened then, which I think was interesting, is that at the same time, event marketers saw the introduction of email, and it was an extremely powerful tool for event marketing, still is. On the one hand, it was a lot less expensive than the direct mail and the telemarketing, which were the staples of event marketing back in the mid-90s. But the more appealing aspect of email was that it was immediate. You could put together a message in an hour, and then within 2 or 3 more hours, you'd have 100 or 200 additional registrations. So being able to communicate on a micro level so quickly without the long lead times associated with the other channels and the other prep time really changed the face of event marketing. And then a couple of things happened. First, the tech bubble burst. And then right on its heels, of course, was 9/11. And with those two events, with the bursting of the tech bubble, um, much of the means and the travel and entertainment budget to attend as many events as possible dried up. And with 9/11, a lot of the desire to travel to events also dried up. And whether that was real or perceived didn't matter as much because at that period, there was a lot of hesitation among event planners to schedule events following 9/11. That is, I think, the period that gave birth to the webinar, and other types of virtual events. But there was a period where the entire event industry just sunk like a stone because of those two conditions. So today, here's what it looks like. We have less T&E budget than we did previously. So it's more difficult for people to attend events. The total number of bodies attending events is certainly lower than it was before. As a result, events that were previously seen as complementary are now seen as competing. There's a decision-making process between which event to attend. Email has really taken off, of course, in the last decade, which is great for marketing, but it's a double-edged sword because inboxes are a lot fuller than they were 8 or 10 or 12 years ago. And if you take a look at the graphic here, you see on the left-hand side, you've got this ball rolling quickly down a hill with all of that momentum. On the right, you've got the little arrow, and that's only because I couldn't find a clip art image of Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill, because that's often what it feels like at this point. And I think the other thing that's different now is what I think of as the many hats of event marketers. It used to be that an event marketer was a discrete title, and for many people it was a full-time job. Now, many of the event marketers who I talk to and who are our clients, and I expect a lot of you on the phone, are the people who at your organization are principally responsible for marketing your event, but you also have a number of other responsibilities as well. That may not be that event marketing is your principal responsibility. So it's a tougher environment with significantly fewer resources dedicated to it than we saw in the last decade. So I want to talk a little bit about brand. And brand is a topic that doesn't often figure into event marketing because event marketing is seen largely as a direct response-centric activity. But brand is extremely important to event marketing, in addition to the direct response components, and I'll tell you why. The first reason I think brand is important, though, has nothing to do with the way your event is perceived within your industry, and has everything to do with the way you, as an event organization, perceive your event. I think thinking about your brand forces the organization to identify the value proposition that only your company can fulfill. And at the same time, it compels you to identify a specific target market who this event is aimed at, not just from the marketing standpoint, but also from the programming standpoint, and to some extent from the operations and from the venue. All of this works together. Very often I'll see shows that target the whole industry, and on the Who Should Attend page, it's everybody from mid-level managers at small companies to CEOs of the biggest companies in the industry. Very few shows can get away with that, and I think in today's environment, the shows that are the most successful are the ones that have demonstrated that they are must-attend for a clearly identifiable niche audience, instead of the shows that are largely undifferentiated but portend to appeal to a much larger prospective audience. I think in today's market, that must attend and really targeting a narrow group and demonstrating why that group is important, or why this show is important to that group, is especially vital. And creating a strong brand, I believe, is an important internal exercise to help an organization focus its show. And focus is needed now because this is a period where people are no longer taking a look at a show and saying, sort of in an absolute sense, is this show worth attending? Instead, they're looking at a show and they're saying, I can only go to one show this year. Why should this event be the one? Why is this one better for me than any other show out there? I'm going to get the most education or the best networking or the best return on my time and budget invested in it. And so it's a very different decision-making process that people are going through now. So the brand and the positioning and the focus and that unique value proposition becomes really important. What brand is right for your show? I mean, there's a few brands that I've got on the slide here, none of which at this point are events brands. But the reason I included some of these is because all of these brands mean something. Old Navy, when you see it, if you know the brand, you know it means campy or whimsical and very affordable. FedEx is trustworthy, which is a powerful connection to make with a brand. Southwest Airlines has sort of a refreshing and unexpected yet reliable position about it. And Lexus, of course, is luxurious and exclusive. And all of these are value propositions that the brand conveys. But most importantly, you get that whole description and what that means from the brand itself. They are a shortcut to understanding. And so if you think about what you're doing as an event marketer, you're communicating a lot. You're sending a lot of emails, you're sending direct mail, you might be sending faxes, you are doing telemarketing, you are posting to Facebook and on your blog and spending a lot of time building your company website, your event website. All of that is around convincing people why your event is the one they should attend. A well-established brand is a shortcut. That story doesn't have to be told every single communication because the brand already does it. You have a very limited attention from your audience these days, so these shortcuts are extremely important. And if you don't have to explain your entire value proposition every time you put pixel to screen or pen to paper, then you're saving the attention that's allocated to your event to help further differentiate your event, or you don't need your communications to work as hard. The example I have on here is a conference called TED, by the way, Ideas Worth Spreading. And it's, in my opinion, one of the conferences that has, it's one of the strongest brands in a conference in the world. Some other examples are Macworld Expo or South by Southwest. The Sundance Film Festival is another example. And what they all have in common is that people decide to go to these events not because of what's happening there this year, what the speaker lineup is, or where the venue is, or if it's chicken or fish. They go because there's a history behind this conference, and the brand is promising them that the time and the resources they invest in attending is going to pay off dividends. So it's less about what's happening this year that brings them to the show, as much as it is what's happened in past years and the trust that they're going to deliver the same experience this year. In that sense, brands are, they relieve people of the burden of decision making. And if you think about your own event marketing, anything that relieves people of the burden of decision making so that they're not deliberating over whether or not to attend is certainly a very powerful asset to have. So I'm going to talk now about what I call the agnostic campaign strategy. It used to be that if you wanted to reach everyone or tell everyone something, you would send an email, because that's how you would contact everyone, and everyone would open it and everyone would read it. Well, today, the concept of reaching everyone with a single communication is a myth. It just doesn't happen. What's happened instead is that your prospects, your previous attendees, your customers, all of your constituents are fragmented across a number of different media and platforms and devices. Some of them will find your website in ways you can never identify. Some of them you'll see, you will reach on their mobile device. They're always on their BlackBerry or their iPhone. Some of them are on Twitter or Facebook. Direct mail may be the only way you can reach some others. And email, of course, is still, a staple in communication, but you simply can't reach the same number of people who you used to before. So this channel agnostic strategy is really more a philosophy about leveraging every channel available to you as an event marketer to improve your reach. We'll go through a number of these different channels in the next few slides. The first is email. My thinking on email, I think the secret to sending successful email for event marketing is to rely less on it. And let me explain why. If you're 100% focused on email and it doesn't produce the results that you want, you have no choice, of course, but to send more email. This creates a vicious cycle, right? If it doesn't work, you send more. If you send more, it causes clutter. You end up sending some untargeted messages. Your engagement drops among the people who you were able to reach previously, and you're creating more noise in the inbox. As a result, it ends up working even worse, and your response to that, of course, is to send more email. And then you have no choice, of course, but to blame email for not working anymore. But really, that's an unfair burden to place on email. In fact, it's an unfair burden to place on any channel or any media. Just ask network TV. It's just not possible for any single media to bear the entire burden of 100% of your communications program. So if you want it to work better, you have to take some of that pressure off of it and rely more on some of the other channels that we're going to talk about. So what do? Here's where brand that I was talking about becomes more important, particularly in the subject line and in the from field. If your conference has a strong and recognizable brand, your messages are going to be more anticipated, they're going to seem more relevant, and you're going to see better metrics on your open rate and even on your click-through rates. It's also important to know the limitations of your brand. Not everybody who's been to your conference previously or is part of your organization or is on your list wants to get 10 or 12 messages with every single update about your conference. So I advocate more of a humble approach where you cede some of the control of that inbox to your customers. I strongly recommend that most organizations look at a preferences center or other ways of allowing people to opt into a light subscription where they don't get 8 or 10 messages about the big annual meeting in Orlando in the summer. They might get 4 about when registration is opening, for example, and the registration deadlines, and maybe 1 or 2 other updates throughout that period. They don't need to see every single message. The other point that I advocate is restraint and taking a longer view of what your whole communication program looks like, your whole email campaign to support your event. There was a golfer in the 50s and 60s, a professional golfer by the name of Sam Snead, and he was kind of the Charles Barkley of his era. He was renowned for his witticisms. He had a lot of clever things to say, and he was a big fan of the media because he gave a great interview and could really talk well on his feet. And about the game of golf, he said at one point, every shot that doesn't go in the hole is a miss. Now, he was kidding, of course. It's 18 holes in a round of golf, and I don't think Sam broke 60 in his life. Most professional golfers haven't. So there's, a good 50 misses in everybody's round of golf, even at the world-class level. Sam's point was really to make a little fun of golfers who try to crush it every single time and try to put it in the hole, even from 400 or 500 yards out, instead of taking a strategic approach to the game. And so when I talk about a call to inaction and I talk about Sam Snead, what I mean is that you don't need every one of your messages to drive registration. If you know you're going to be sending somebody 8 pieces of email from the time your registration opens up until the conference itself, to try to compel that registration from the very beginning every single time is probably not the most effective strategy. Instead, what your strategy should be is to educate them about the show and that message. And instead of selling the show, you want to sell your next message. Engagement at this point is as dear a commodity as the registration itself. If you can keep them engaged till the next message, you can move them closer and closer to the show instead of turning them off from the very beginning. So take that long view in your email campaigns. Direct mail it's actually enjoying a bit of a resurgence right now, which surprised me given the environmental sensitivity that a lot of organizations now show, and a lot of prospects show as well. Companies are more careful about sending direct mail out of the perceived waste of resources. It's also a lot more expensive, and so when budgets are tight, direct mail was one of the first channels to start to be cut down. But now companies are coming back to it. And I guess it's ultimately not surprising, because the organizations that became heavily reliant on email and saw it starting to work less effectively as they'd like it to, started to fall back on direct mail as their legacy channel. It's what they had in place previously, so they started to put a little more energy into that. And I think where direct mail can be valuable, particularly given the expense, is to focus not on reaching your email contacts one more time or reaching them out of the inbox, not to focus on frequency, it's to focus on reach. I advocate using precision within your direct mail marketing to target your audience members who are unresponsive to email or unresponsive to your other channels. If the only place you can get them is email or is direct mail, that's the channel you should use. But it shouldn't be about duplicating what you're doing in your other channels. I'm a big fan of channel-specific communications. So when I think of direct mail, what a lot of organizations do is they send a big glossy brochure. Instead, I recommend organizations find ways to break through that clutter, either with personal messages from an executive director or somebody associated with the conference, or other creative executions that leverage the medium a little better. If you've got a package going to a prospect, for example, and that prospect, in many cases, is in a B2B environment and is at a business address, chances are there's between 1 and 50 other people at that same address that might be good prospects for your event. So instead of sending a single glossy brochure, maybe send a stack of half a dozen coupons, or 2 tchotchkes, or a box of 12 cookies. Something that takes advantage of that location with a bunch of prospects that your message has just penetrated and is going to encourage some pass along. Channel-specific communications can really pay off. On to mobile. And I think of mobile more as quality over quantity. But first, there's really 2 ways to think about mobile. The first is SMS, or text messaging. SMS campaigns are when people can opt in to receive text messages to their phone instead of an email message, for example. The other way that more companies are familiar with, of course, is just sending them email that is then being read on their smartphone, on a PDA or a BlackBerry or an iPhone or an iPad or another mobile device. There was a lot of activity around SMS campaigns a few years ago, and then with the advent of smartphones, I think marketers started to curtail their SMS activities because they're difficult to scale. It's difficult because people protect the privacy of that text messaging channel so vigilantly. Marketers just weren't seeing sheer tonnage of subscribers to text updates. But I think there's a way to use that to your advantage. If you do offer an SMS or a text subscription or a text campaign, and it's opt-in, of course, you're going to see far fewer subscribers than you do in any other channel. There's no doubt about that. But the people you're going to get who are subscribing are your VEPs, your very engaged persons. And I think rolling out a channel like that and putting some energy behind it is valuable for a few reasons. First, it's valuable to know how many VEPs you have. If you're looking for 1,000 people to come to your show, how many people are so engaged that you know you can count on them? That's a really important number to start to get smart about. Knowing who they are specifically is also valuable. And if you couple your SMS campaign with a preference center that also manages their inbound or their email communications, you'll know who from your email list is also part of your VEP SMS subscribers. But the other thing I think is valuable is that you'll know that the recipients of these messages on this list, however small, are all going to read the message that you send. You can almost be assured of guaranteed open and consumption of that message just because that channel is protected so vigilantly. People don't ignore text messages. Even if they're commercial text messages, almost everything that hits the phone gets read. So you're giving up that sheer tonnage, but you're reaching people who you know are very engaged, and you can really start to craft some unique messages and campaigns around that understanding. social media is obviously enjoying a huge amount of attention in marketing in general, and email marketing in particular, and event marketing in particular right now. And I think it's challenging because unlike most other channels, there is a cost of failure in social media marketing in the event space. And let me explain what I mean. Social media is about conversations. It's about engagement. It's about education in some ways, and it's about connecting the show with your audience and connecting your audience with other parts of your audience. In a sense, then, it's a microcosm of the show itself. So if you launch social media efforts and you don't put enough energy into them and they're not successful and they aren't supported, they can wither on the vine. And you've all seen this happen with Facebook pages that only have half a dozen followers, or Twitter accounts that no one is paying a lot of attention to, or that don't have a lot of activity around them. But because the functions of the social media are so close to the function of the event itself, I believe there's a risk for event marketers. I believe there's a risk that the perception of the show could be damaged by social media efforts that aren't well executed, because suddenly this audience starting to question the organization's ability to foster connections and start communications, which is what the show is designed to do. The other challenge, maybe it's an opportunity, depends on how you look at it, is that social media, I think more than the other channels I've talked about so far, absolutely has to be channel specific. Let me give you a couple of examples, some case studies that we've seen of organizations who've used social media specifically for event marketing. There was a conference a few years ago that was put on by a company that was involved in social media marketing, particularly it was called widget marketing. And as part of the social media campaign, prospective attendees could go onto the website for the conference, and there was a widget set up there where they could design their own conference badge. They could import a photo of themselves that they wanted, or of their kids, or of a goldfish or whatever. There were templates they could choose from. They could pick their own typeface and move stuff around and choose different color schemes. It was really kind of fun. But then what happened is that those badges that they created were turned into images and put up on Flickr and turned into a slideshow. And this slideshow served on the website as the list of who's attending. Instead of saying their name and their company, you'd see instead the badge that they designed and a picture of themselves if they'd put it on there or whatever. So it started to develop that community even before the event started. And then finally, of course, the badges that these people created were actually printed out, and these are the badges that they wore at the conference. So that conversation and that icebreaker that started on Flickr, with that interaction with the event itself through the designing of the badge, was already in full swing by the time people arrived at the conference. It turned out to be very successful. Another example that uses Twitter. There's an association that has a large annual their annual meeting. It's attended by thousands of people from across the industry. And what they did is they created a Twitter account specific to the event. And then they took a live feed, unedited, of that Twitter account, and they put it on the homepage of the event. They put it on other pages within the event. They put it on the homepage of the main organization's website as well. These really valuable online media that was difficult for exhibitors and other companies to have access to. And then anytime one of their speakers or exhibitors would tweet about the event, they would retweet onto their own Twitter account, so that then the exhibitor's brand or the speaker's Twitter account would show up right there on the homepage. It was a very powerful way for the exhibitors to get in front of this audience that they were wanting to get in front of in the first place due to their participation at the event. And at the same time, it gave all of these companies an incentive to promote their involvement at the event weeks and months ahead of time to their 10, 20, in some cases 30,000 Twitter followers. As a result, the association was able to reach hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers and other people it was not able to reach through its own channels. So what both of these campaigns have in common is that they were tailored specifically around social media, and there was ongoing resources in place to support them from the time they launched straight through to the conference. The other thing I'll say about social media is that one of the things we found is that the hardest part is often getting your message onto social media in the first place. So, we add share with your network links to email, and we encourage people to share the messages that we're sending. But we found that once messages get onto Facebook or Twitter already, people are much likely to pass them along than they are to make that first step themselves and post them. So you don't have to rely on your audience to get the stuff onto Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn in the first place. Take your web version of your emails and post it onto your own Facebook page or onto Twitter. Ask your employees to leverage their personal networks and do the same thing. Take advantage of the resources you have to get your message on the social channels, and they're more likely to spread than if you leave it all up to your followers to do for you. Video's fun right now because it's really, really easy. It's a shiny toy. The sheer novelty of video content promoting events draws an audience. An example, here's a case study. An organization that we worked with recently, they sent an email to their standard house list on their upcoming conference. It was just the first email promoting the conference, and it was sent to everybody who subscribed. That same exact message content was created as a video, which essentially was the executive director talking through the same content in sort of a conversational tone in front of a webcam attached to his computer, and edited and produced very rudimentary stuff using the default preset settings on like iMovie or whatever came stock on a computer that nobody spent any extra money on. And it ran for about 90 seconds, and they put it up on YouTube. And then they took that YouTube video and they embedded it on their blog, and they posted it to Facebook, and they put it on Twitter. They put it in all of their other electronic channels, with the exception of the email that they sent out. They said nothing in the email about this video version. So really, the objective was to compare what happened in email versus what happened with the video. The result is that far more people viewed the video, and that's what's valuable about YouTube. You can see how many people have viewed it. Far more people have viewed the video than opened the email. And that was by sending it to nobody, just putting it in the channels that they had already developed. Content was no different, but the delivery mechanism is what drew people to it. So knowing that, start using video. You don't have to be great at it right now. The bar is not very high. The bar is rising, so it's important to develop some comfort now, because video, I think, is going to be a very important part of almost all digital marketing. You want to have facility with it next year, because ultimately mastery is going to be required. So as your audience's expectations rise, you need to make sure that your capabilities rise with them. The website, obviously, is a huge part of any organization's event marketing program. It's a lot closer to, I don't think of the website as a conference brochure anymore. It's not just about delivering conference information. It's much more like a fully functional e-commerce program. As an event marketer, you face the same challenges of Amazon.com and Gap.com and BestBuy.com and anybody else who's selling online. You've got to drive traffic. You've got to qualify that traffic by merchandising your content effectively, and you've got to compel conversions to purchase. So the good news is that there are no shortage of examples of how to do that. All of your favorite online stores are potential best cases or best practices for you. Take a look at what compels you to dig deeper and find more product information. See how the use of multimedia is affecting purchase habits. See how different payment systems make an impact on your ability or your willingness to make a purchase on the spot. See how email marketing that these retailers do qualifies you before you get to the website, so you're more likely to make a purchase when you get there. The point is, if it sells shoes online, those same tactics you can also use to sell full conference registrations. But the difference, I think, between event marketing and traditional online retail is that people attend conferences for very different reasons, right? Some people go because there is a single company that they want to meet with. Some people go because every year they just get a lot out of the networking. Some people go because this is a boondoggle for them, and if they can spend 3 days at Palm Beach, or Palm Desert, they're going to do it. And some people will go because the keynote sessions are really what they look forward to, or the tracks. The point is, every component of your event is going to be relevant to somebody, and it's always going to be in different ratios. So I advocate an aggressive landing page strategy. Break your content into small pieces, the content that you communicate out to your people. Instead of messages that say, here's a list of our keynotes, here's a list of our sessions, here's a list of our tracks, here's how long the networking runs, here's who's in our expo, and package everything into that communication, focus on one thing, and then send people to a landing page on that one thing. And you get there are a couple of advantages, I think, to this system. The first is that you've got a greater chance of putting your prospects right on the page that's going to get their attention and it's going to compel them to attend. The homepage doesn't do that, right? The homepage of your event website is designed to get people off the homepage and further into the site. If you can skip that section altogether and move them further into the site without that homepage, which inevitably drops some people off, then you're further along. The second reason is that it gives you some intelligence about what works. So for example, if you're taking a look at your email analytics and you see there's a lot of links to your homepage, it doesn't tell you that much. It doesn't tell you what people are finding appealing. But if you see there are a lot of links to the biography of this keynote speaker that you're talking about in your email, or registration for the golf event on the afternoon of day 2, then you're starting to figure out what buttons to push, what levers to pull. And so it gives you a little more insight on how to micro market certain parts of your event. The way that I think about the role here is not so much a traffic driver. That's not really what you should be doing. You're the expert on your event. You know more about what comprises your event, all of the qualities, than your audience does. So your role is as a guide to get them to the parts of the event that are most appropriate for their interests. Word of mouth is organic farming. And what I mean by that is, like organic farming, it works best when it's left to develop on its own. Right? No artificial anything, no bioengineered this or that, purely organic. But it also does need extremely fertile conditions, and if you want anything to grow, you still have to plant the seed. So the fertile conditions in word of mouth, I think of as a niche. The more clearly something resonates with a person, the more likely that person is to become an advocate, not just a fan, but an advocate, which is the next step, and start to spread word of mouth. Particularly with social media. If you've been on blogs or Twitter or Facebook, you know that over 90% of what people post on there is about themselves. I think that whole channel is designed so that people can talk about themselves without feeling egotistical about talking about themselves, because the stigma of talking about yourself is removed if 72 million people are doing it. Or to tell people something that will let them draw some conclusions about themselves, which is the left-handed way of doing it. So if you have a show or some content around a show that really is going to resonate with the people, with your audience, that's the sort of thing that is most likely to get passed along, which is why the niche aspects of a show, and it doesn't have to be a niche show, but some of the narrow targeted aspects of the show, go back to that landing page strategy, those small pieces of event content, that's the stuff that's more likely to get passed along. The seed that you have to plant is asking. If your show is worth talking about, just ask your audience to do exactly that. You'll be amazed at how many people will respond if you do that, particularly if you ask them to pass it on shortly right after they've registered. That's when they're at their most engaged. That's when you have their attention. That's when you have their attention. They're currently engaged at that point. So in the PS of your confirmation email, just try adding a simple sentence like, if you're on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, would you mind passing along that you'll be coming to this event? We'd love for you to tell all of your friends and colleagues that you'll be there. You'll be surprised at how many people will take it up on you. For marketing automation, these are event-triggered campaigns or event-triggered sequences of marketing. And I liken them to the children's game Mousetrap, right? You twist the crank and it kicks over the pail and the marble rolls down the staircase and something else happens and then the guy jumps into the bathtub and then all of a sudden you've snagged yourself a full conference attendee, right? The idea is to build a system like that runs automatically. Your customer comes in and they twist the crank and it sets in motion all of these activities that are designed to move them closer and closer to making a registration. In Real Magnet, we call them campaigns, and here's an example. So let's say you added a subscription option to your event. Right on the home page, it says, tell me more about this event. One option is simply to add that person to your email list, and then in 4 or 8 or 24 days when you send an email out to your subscribers, they'll get that. But a better way is to take advantage of that engagement and initiative they have just shown by setting up a campaign of 3 messages that go out once a day over the next 3 days or 5 days or whatever schedule you set up. Day 1, for example, is a message all about the conference's speakers and education. Day 2 might be about the peer networking opportunities, what companies typically attend, who's registered for this year, for example. Day 3 might focus on the expo and other activities. And these can all change, of course, based on what's important to what are the unique qualities of your event and how you're differentiating it. But the idea is to capitalize on that immediate engagement of your audience, the initiative that they took, and use this opportunity to move them closer to the registration. And these aren't messages where you're saying register today as much as it's nice to meet you. Here's a little bit about our event. Let's stay in touch. Success metrics, of course, are hugely important. And it's really vital to keep track of these throughout the entire event marketing process, not just at the end of the event. I start with benchmarks. Especially this year, you need to be benchmarking over the past 2 years. I hope last year was an anomaly and everybody has a better event business in 2010 than they did in 2009. So benchmarking back to 2008 and 2007 certainly makes a lot of sense. It gives you more data to make your comparisons to, and it's just a more valuable process. The email analytics, I mean, we could talk about this for 45 minutes, but in general, what I advocate is focusing on trends over snapshots. What your open rate was on the email you sent out Tuesday is less useful to you as an event marketer than seeing what direction your open rate and your click-through rate for your event emails are trending over the last 4, 5, or 6 event emails. Are you building momentum? Is momentum flagging? Was there a spike that you can identify and figure out what drove it, for example? Web analytics are also particularly important. People are coming to your website from everywhere, but taking a look at the top content will start to help you figure out what's really resonating with people, and that can really shape your communications. If you find that you're not getting a lot of traffic to your keynotes, but your track session on the use of mobile in your industry is getting a ton of web traffic, you know where to focus your next round of communications, whether it's an email or direct mail or Twitter or Facebook or anything else, or even what to bubble up to the home page of your website. Conversion rates, again, remember, you're in the e-commerce business, are really important. Now, the retailers, of course, are working with very sophisticated analytics packages, and they have 6 Sigma accuracy and attribution, and they know exactly which conversions came from which channels. You don't need to be that accurate. At the very least, though, what you should be doing is taking a look at the total number of unique visitors or unique visits to your website over a period. A week is a good place to start. And then take a look at the total number of conference registrations that happened during that same period and start to track that. And again, look for spikes. Is there something that's happening on a macro level around a specific week that's causing a peak or a valley? Try to figure out what marketing activities are coinciding with those changes in that trend and either fix them or exploit them, depending on which way that spike is going. Daily reporting is also really important. Less about what you're reporting on a daily basis, I think, than who you're reporting it to. I think informing all of the event constituents at your organization, even those people who are outside specifically of the event realm, but senior management and other people within the organization, of some level of daily metrics is extremely valuable. What that does is it engages people from all levels of the organization, as many stakeholders as possible, and it makes everybody feel like they're part of the events team and connected to the organization. That means they all feel in some measure responsible for its success, which of course as an event marketer certainly helps you out. So that's the end of the part that I'm going to be presenting on. Jim Katz is here. He's Senior Vice President of Sales at Real Magnet, and he is going to spend a little time talking about the event registration engine. When he's done, I'll be back on the line along with Jim, and we'll be happy to take some questions from y'all. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. And again, I just have a very brief presentation, really 3 or 4 slides to go through, and then we'll get into your questions. The first thing I wanted to talk about was essentially Real Magnet's event registration engine combined with our email capabilities. And essentially Mike just went through 7 different channels to consider for event promotions, and I'm going to circle back to that one, email, and just describe briefly some of the benefits, some of the unique examples of how our clients are currently taking advantage of both the email channel along with an integrated registration engine. By almost all standards, email is one of the most impactful tools for promoting an event. And we're going to describe event a little bit differently later on. There are increasing and creative uses of this combined integrated email and registration engine capabilities. And it was about 2 to 3 years ago that Real Magnet did introduce that event component, which you see sort of at 7th tab over. So what are the advantages of using this capability? What does it really mean, and how are folks taking advantage of it? Some examples are the ability to send out an email and actually pre-populate that form. Obviously what this is going to do is it's going to drive higher participation rates because these folks don't have the requirement to fill in the blank. You've already done it for them. They simply need to fill in their credit card. Secondly, Mike talked a little bit about the use of campaigns. Some of these refer to this as drip marketing. Well, when you've got a series of 5 promotions set up, you want to automatically be able to filter out those people who registered for that event, whatever that event might be, so that they don't get the subsequent promos. And again, this sounds very straightforward, but without an integrated solution, sometimes you have to do that manually. And then lastly is the ability to automate the confirmation and reminder emails. And again, some systems limit you in the number of emails, reminder emails you can send out, and also limit you in the level of branding and flexibility of the design of those emails. So it's always nice to be able to have a lot of creativity in how you want to do that. And then lastly is to get unique individual tracking on those messages as well. If you're having a webinar, by example, it'd be nice to know who exactly was involved or who that you had sent those webinar credentials actually went in and opened and looked at those credentials. So how are folks using some of this today, and what are some of the classic examples, and what are some of the, shall we say, more unconventional ways of taking advantage of this capability? Obviously we all know about physical events. Mike just went through several examples of those. Typical conferences, physical events that are held in any given year. We also know about webinars, right, and how to be able to not only promote that event, but then once somebody registers for that event, even if it's using personal pins, being able to populate that back into not only confirmation web page, but also emails that are sent out subsequently. Landing pages for white papers. Again, people don't typically remember or think of an event promotion as being a landing page for a white paper, but essentially, same technology can be used there. Obviously, the selling of products and services, right? Again, a lot of you out there are looking to sell multiple publications of some kind, and this is a good example of how to do that. And then lastly, something that's near and dear to everyone is membership renewals, right? Again, this is an example of an event that could take advantage of the combined uses of this email channel along with a registration engine. So with that, whether you're setting up events that are free or paid, or they're going to members or clients or non-members or prospects, what we're advocating here is for you to encourage essentially and explore what are some of the unique benefits of the integrated technologies of email and registration.